Welcome to another installment of Needs Analysis. In this particular video, I'm going to exclusively talk about that part 1 that is due for class. So we're talking about the pre-assessment phase, and you heard me say before in the methodologies, or you will hear me talk about in the methodologies, that when we are consulting for a company or for a client where they have a need, we want to define the project. So that's the purpose of the exercise. What are we trying to get at? Are we trying to increase productivity? Are we trying to decrease errors? What is exactly that we're trying to do? And of course, at that point, we begin collecting facts. We need to begin defining the categories. Is it personnel? Is it processes? Is it documentation? Is it resources? What it is that is affecting this need, that is creating this need. And that's going to help us because we will know then at that point what to look for. And usually we look at historical data, look at records that have been collected from the floor, from associates, from results, from earnings, etc., previous surveys, whatnot. And once we have that historical data, we can then figure out what exactly we have, what we need, and kind of in a sense validate, yes, there is a need. So at that point, we define the goal for the needs analysis. And so once we have that definition, what are we going after? So we are answering that question. Then the next step is to figure out the logistics. How long is it going to take us to do it? That's the timeline. I'm going to do this for you in a month. I'm going to do this for you in 3 weeks. In this case, of course, it could be 8 weeks if it's an accelerated semester, or it could be 15 weeks, depending on what we are doing. Then, of course, in reality, you would also set a budget. Do you need to bring more people? Do you need transportation? Would you need to fly on site? Do you need to host a number of people for a focus group, etc.? So all of that is a budget consideration. And then, of course, the effort. What are you talking about in terms of an effort to find out what is the cause of the need and how you are going to potentially solve it? What is your proposal for solving it? So at this point, when we have the pre-assessment phase, we need to figure out also in collecting the point A and point B. What is the current state and where should we go, or where are we going? What is important to the client? What is important for us to fill that gap? So start thinking about it. Now that you have a topic for the needs analysis in this course, you need to also figure out the nature of the organization. Here you need to give us a little bit of context for the needs analysis. Remember, you are being a consultant for a company and we don't necessarily know this company. So you need to provide that context. The name of the organization, the location, the industry, the vision or mission and purpose of what they do. Are they a service organization? Are they a product organization? Are they a retail organization, etc.? And then what else is necessary depending on the need? Is it the number of people? Is it the production levels? Is it benchmarks? Is it best in class of the industry? What are we trying to get? So you have to set up the context as to why we are even looking at all this information. As a part of this topic preparation, you also need to gather some factors that indicate the gap. In other words, what is the current state? And what is the future state? So when you talk to your client, they probably say to you, hey, I need to increase X, or I need to decrease Y, or I would like to change the productivity level to this standard, whatever it may be. So you need to gather that information from an initial conversation with your client. And if you already have it, fantastic. You just have to define it or write it down. If you don't have it, you need to ask those questions. So here are some bullets that are going to help you figure out those current states and the future states, beginning with dissatisfaction with the current situation. What is not working? Ask those questions. What are the current issues? What are the future learnings or performance needs that are necessary for your client to do better, to perform better? Be careful with the implication of a solution that requires training, because remember how I have said, not always training is necessary. But usually people start looking into that, we have to develop training, or we have to improve the performance, and that it may be the case, but increasing the performance does not necessarily mean learning. Sometimes also you have to identify there's no evidence. So historically and hypothetically, somebody's telling you something, but you don't necessarily see it. So you have to find that evidence. If there is no evidence, you need to document that too because it needs to go in your report. But this is information you are gathering right now. So ask those questions, ask for clues, any diagnostic information, any trends, any reports, anything like that. So that's what you're going to be doing in this phase of the pre-assessment. And then of course identify the questions that are challenging because either they're telltale signs or they are going to implicate people or they are going to not be answered by the people that are perhaps helping you but not really. So you have to keep in mind all those considerations. Now, for our requirements, I would like for you to consider a cover page, and this is the only time you will have to make one. So this cover page will be the one you will use for now, and when you submit your hat at the end of the semester, you will use the exact same cover page. So you only create it once, you only get graded on it once, and of course you get feedback and you can fix it if you need to. But usually a cover page is very easy and you wouldn't need to make many changes to it. Remember, it's got to be APA formatted, so be careful with that. And then in the pre-assessment and planning phase, which is part one, basically what you're going to define is the scope of the analysis, how far you're going to go down, what are you planning on doing. And then make sure you use APA writing, the background of the information, the company, the client, all the facts that I mentioned to you before. And then of course, what is the overall question? In this case, if you can read an assignment, an assigned reading that talks about how to reframe a question. So that's sometimes we are negative in the way we ask questions, and so the overall question usually that we want to ask the client or we want to put in our pre-assessment is going to have to be very unbiased and non-directional. So read that article, Ideas How to Reframe. It should be on Blackboard in our assigned reading. So that will help you to reframe the question. Sometimes it's just a matter of idioms. Sometimes it's a matter of being more effective looking at the forest instead of the trees or vice versa, depending on what you are looking for. Also, in this pre-assessment or in this planning, you have to talk about the process, basically the framework of your problem or the need. In these, things to include are data obtained from the client, essentially when they came to you and said, hey, I have this problem, or hey, I have this need, or I need a solution for, and that's something that we need. Okay, so beyond the explanation, the context of what company you're serving or what business or what person, you also need to describe in this document what is it that you're going to be going after. And then of course begin describing what the current state is. If it's a productivity or if it's a production, then set those numbers. The numerical values usually help, quantifiables, percentages, etc. That helps. Also the stakeholders, it doesn't need to be anything more than who you will be interacting with. Is it the chief of production? Is it the floor manager and the CEO of the company or the general manager, etc.? And then last but not least is that statement of agreement, which you will see that in some of the examples. All that is like a memo style. And this is the item that you actually would give your client. It's almost like a contract, if you will. But it's less than a contract, but it's definitely a document that does not necessarily conform like a paper, like you would write for a class, but it's more something you would give a client in real life. So if you are truly working with someone, this is what you would hand them. The statement of agreement is essentially, you are hiring me to do this, and this is how long I am going to take, and this is how much it is going to cost, and this is the project plan, and these are the people that I'm going to talk to. So make sure you have that. Now that takes us to what we are asking exactly. So from the syllabus, you can find this in the syllabus. So part one is no more than 2 to 4 pages. If you are going beyond 4 pages, you are definitely putting too much. So you need to skim it down a little bit. if you are putting everything into one page, you probably need to give us a little bit more context. In those pages, you need to include the scope of the analysis. What is you need to outline the problem, explain the process, what the opportunity is, what the issue, etc. You also need to include the overall question, and there is a heading for that. You can see that in the example. Provide at least one powerful question, so make sure you have that one thing. I would recommend not to exceed one question, because usually the more questions we add as far as the powerful questions, if we add more than one, then our project is going to be humongous and you won't have enough time to complete it within the given time in our class. So make sure you keep it down to one item. Traditionally, or in real life, you would probably address a few, but in this case, try to keep it down to one. And then, of course, get into the framework of the problem. Using your pre-assessment meeting, that's when you find out more information, or if you're interviewing other people, the chief of the production line or the floor manager, etc., make sure you gather that information, and so you find out exactly the framework of that problem. Within that, you have to describe the makeup and the issues facing the organization, the department, or the work group, or the person, or the group of people, who the stakeholders are. Identify the clients or the partners that you will use for this analysis. And then, of course, that memo or statement of agreement, that should be an appendix, and that is included in that count of pages 2 to 4. So if your content is about 2 pages long, and then your memo statement is that appendix, that'll be 3 pages, and then the cover page is 4 pages, and you're set. If you have any questions, make sure you send me an email or comment on the Q&A section of our class. Otherwise, I wish you the best, and I hope part 1 goes smoothly. Thanks all. Until next time.